Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Gypsy Nurses Fall 2021 virtual conference. I am Rachel Alton, the online community manager for the Gypsy Nurse, and we are so happy for you to join us on this first day of the conference. We already have one in the bag, so we are on our second conference. I am here with Steve Curtin, the CEO of the Gypsy Nurse, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to him. He's going to tell you a little bit more about the conference and about the Gypsy Nurse.
All right, great to see you again, Rachel. We're off to a great start here for our second annual fall conference. As you mentioned earlier, we had a fantastic session earlier today with the folks from TNA Healthcare going over Travel Nurse 101. So for those that weren't able to join that session, that will be available on demand at some point over the next day or so on our newly revised website, thegypsynurse.com. We've added a number of different features and enhancements for registered users. So if you are not a member, we encourage you to do so and check out all of our new features. We have a brand new events hub, and that's where you can see all of our upcoming events, as well as the on-demand events that we have. So all of these sessions will be available on demand. We know nurses have a very busy schedule, so we have presentations over the next 3 days. We have a presentation coming up with Ashley Graham from Travel Nurse Across America regarding travel safety. We have another one coming up this evening with Brittany Garcia from TNA Healthcare regarding traveling with children. And we have 3 more tomorrow and three more Friday. So we have a very full schedule. But if you can't make it, they're available on demand by virtue of being a registered member of thegypsynurse.com. So check it out. But we would like to thank our sponsor for this fall conference, Fusion Marketplace. They've been a fantastic sponsor with us so far this year, and we appreciate their sponsorship of the fall 2021 virtual conference. I would like to thank all of our presenters, and we are looking forward to a fantastic next few days of virtual conference activity. So Rachel, back to you.
Yes, definitely. And we would like to also thank all of the nurses out there. You've been working so hard this past year and a half. So thank you, a million thank yous. We couldn't do enough, or you can't do enough for us. So, well, I'm saying that all wrong, but you guys are
we know what you're saying.
But yes, and then we would also like to thank our sponsor again. Fusion Marketplace is a one-stop shop for healthcare travelers where they can easily compare benefits, pay packages, and reviews across multiple agencies. As a travel-first driven platform, Fusion Marketplace has curated a career experience where healthcare travelers can take control of their own career. And they have a little message for us. They couldn't be with us today in this session, but we have a little video for you for them to read.
One of the biggest challenges you face as a traveler is finding housing for your next job. Fusion Marketplace combines job and housing options in one convenient location, so it's easier for you to find your next great job and where you're going to stay. Search for nearby housing options on your job card by navigating to Nearby Housing. From there, you can view all housing options that are within range of that job. Click on More Details to view the specific amenities of that housing option, like how many bedrooms and bathrooms, utilities, pet policies, and availability. Once you're ready to book, click Book on Furnished Finder to navigate to the Furnished Finder website. Here, you'll be able to see more details and grab the perfect place to rest your head at night. This Fusion Marketplace feature integrates both your job and housing options in one place, taking the guesswork out of the housing conversation, so you can be in control of where you'll work and where you'll stay.
So thank you so much, Fusion Marketplace, for sponsoring our conference. We are doing giveaways all week long. So during the conference, this session, if you ask any questions, just by interacting, telling us your favorite housing tip, giving Ashley some support, you're going to be entered to win a $75 Amazon gift card. So be sure to comment and give Ashley some support there. So let's bring Ashley on. She is She's been with TNA for many years and has almost 19 years of experience in the healthcare industry. So let's go ahead and bring Ashley on. All right. Hello, Ashley. Thank you so much.
Hello,
Ashley!
Rachel. Hi, Steve. Hel-
Hello!
Hello to the Gypsy community. I'm so excited to be here this afternoon.
We're
We
We're,
ready?
happy
we're,
to have you.
we're excited to
Yeah.
have you. Absolutely. Thank you for doing this. This is great. This is not your first time on the Gypsy Nurse Live, so you're a veteran of this, but we're excited to hear all the information you can bring to the community about how to travel safely. And we neglected to mention earlier, Ashley, that the theme of this year's fall conference is essentially education or back to school. So you're going to kind of school us on how to travel safely, I guess, right?
Yes. Well, and as you and Rachel both know, education is like at the top of my list. I want to be transparent. I want to share that knowledge that I've accumulated over all these years and set people up for success as they're navigating being a traveling healthcare professional, and especially as it relates to housing and safety, which is what we're going to talk about today. Um, I want to start by just talking about how important, first and foremost, safety is. You are literally picking up your whole life and you are going from one place to the next. And so just doing some really key things to make sure that you're keeping yourself safe are going to be so incredibly valuable. One of the first things that I want to touch on is just making sure that when you're looking for your housing, that you're doing your due diligence on the areas around the facility and the housing location. You want to make sure you're familiarizing yourself with what type of area it is so that you can kind of prepare yourself accordingly. It's just one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. So doing a little bit of prep work on the front end so that you can make sure you have the tools and the resources available to you once you make it to that area are going to be really key. There are tons of different websites that you can utilize to do this. There are several crime check websites that are great resources where you can go out and do a little bit of due diligence around how safe the area is. Can I walk around at night? All of those things that are going to be really valuable and important. And I would highly recommend that you do that both regarding your housing location as well as your facility location. That way you are just prepared and you know what to expect. It's always going to be really important for you to also focus on familiarizing yourself with your surroundings. You want to look for blind spots. You want to find places where people can easily hide. I'm not saying that that's something that's necessarily going to happen to you, but the reality is you just don't know. So it's important for you to familiarize yourself. Do an assessment. Make sure that you fully understand exactly what the area looks like, if there are any blind spots. You also want to make sure you're choosing well-lit parking, both in your housing location as well as the facility location. And as you also explore the area, you're going to want to do the same. Choosing well-lit parking is going to potentially deter any safety hazards that you may experience. And in addition to choosing well-lit parking, you also might want to choose a path when you're walking in and out of different locations that is as well-lit as possible as well. One of the other things that I think we all do, I know I'm a people person, so I tend to be a little bit of an oversharer. But as a traveling healthcare professional, you need to be mindful of how much information that you share at work regarding your housing location. It's not unusual for people just in general to be really inquisitive, and it is completely within your rights to be very protective of that information. And in fact, I encourage you to do so. It's different if it's somebody that you know or you're familiar with, but more than likely you're going to a location where you've never been before, and you're working with people that really are literally strangers to you at that point. And that goes both to, that applies to both internal staff as well as the patients that you're serving and the family members that you're interacting with. You just have to be really mindful and keep that information as private as you possibly can to protect yourself. We never want to assume people have ill intentions, but there's also really no way to predict when somebody does have those ill intentions. So just be mindful of what types of information that you share. And if you do share, try to make it as general as possible. But whenever possible, just politely just say, I'd rather not share that information. And there are going to be some people out there that aren't necessarily going to appreciate that answer, but you're doing it to protect yourself. And ultimately, your safety is your primary goal. You want the assignment to be successful, and that begins with creating a very safe and comfortable environment for you, regardless of where you are. So let's talk a little bit about service providers. We have lots of different benefits. One of the benefits that we have at TNA is a partnership with Rover, and it's a dog walking service. So when you're thinking about, partnering with different service providers, and this can be cable installers, this can be dog walkers, it can be a housekeeper, a mobile detail place. You need to get your windshield repaired. They may be aware of both your work and your home location. So maybe using a service such as Angie's List is always a really great resource so that you can make sure you're fully vetting the different providers you might use for some of those resources. That also is going to apply to childcare and other things. Any service provider that you've got offering you a service that's coming in and out of your home or is aware of your place of work needs to be fully vetted. I think that's really valuable. And then moving on to just kind of communication points, how to make sure that you've got some lifelines. First and foremost, you probably want to have somebody that you speak with or you communicate with often enough that they understand your schedule. Now, you might be saying, well, I don't really know anybody here, and that's okay. And if you do know somebody locally, that's ideal. But if you don't, make sure you've got a friend or a family member that you're interacting with, you're exchanging text messages with, that you're talking to almost daily. So that then if there's any type of disruption in your schedule, or they don't hear from you as often or as regularly as they're used to hearing from you, they're going to know that that's a red flag. It just creates a layer of safety because you've got somebody else that's aware of what your schedule's like and is aware when there is a ripple in when they're used to interacting and hearing from you. It's just really important to do that. The next thing that we want to talk about too is then also exploring the area. You're traveling healthcare professionals. You're not just there for the job, you're also there to explore and experience other areas, cities and states that you've never been to. And with that comes a little bit of risk. And so you just have to make sure that you're preparing yourself accordingly. So I think it's really valuable and important for you to let somebody know, give them a heads up, do check-ins. Before and after, or even throughout the day, if you're deviating from your regular patterns. So if you decide that you're going to go somewhere, let's say you're going to go on a hike, particularly those more remote types of excursions like hiking or doing some trail riding or exploring some waterfalls, any of those things where you might not be in constant communication. It's also probably good to assess whether or not you're going to have good cell service. And if you're not, just set some really firm check-in timelines with whoever your accountability partner is and let them know what you're doing, the length of time that you potentially expect to be unavailable, and make sure you do both at a minimum a check-in as you're going on your fun excursion, and also do a check-in once you are on your way back home. It's just a good way to, again, have that accountability partner so that they know what you're doing and they can also check in with you regularly. And then they know if they don't hear from you when you said you were going to communicate with them, then they know that you are going to, then more than likely something has gone wrong. And then they can start sending those smoke signals up and trying to figure out how they can find you. It's also probably really valuable for you to make some sort of a contact while you're on assignment as well that you can refer a friend or a family member who's not physically in the area with you to, if those situations occur. It's just all about having those layers of safety. And again, some people might find it strange, or some people may not fully understand why you're doing it, but ultimately your safety is key, and you have to be able to create an environment that you can thrive in. And nobody likes to feel safe. There's a certain level of anxiety and stress that is added to the dynamic of taking a traveling assignment when you're in a scenario where you don't feel safe. One of the other big topics that comes up pretty frequently for TNAA is the assignment address. You may have had your agency ask for your assignment address. Your agency may have helped with your housing, they may not have, but they're asking for that for a reason. So if you have the opportunity or you're asked for that information, I'm going to encourage you to provide it. If they don't ask for it, proactively send your recruiter, or if you have a contact within the housing team, or maybe even an HR or a clinical person. If you have somebody that you interact with regularly and it's not part of their onboarding process, just go ahead and share that information so that they can make sure it's available in the system. This helps when we need to do wellness checks. This helps when you miss a shift and nobody's heard from you. The reality is that us as agencies, we care. And so we want to be able to have some safety measures in place on our end as well, so that there is a problem. If we don't hear from you, if you are you never miss a shift and then suddenly you miss a shift, that is one of the reasons why agencies are asking for your assignment address. They're not doing it to be nosy. They're doing it simply because they care, and they want to make sure that they physically know where you are should some sort of an emergency or situation arise where we need to send somebody to do a wellness check. So just be really diligent in that. Again, if the agency asks for it, provide it. If they don't ask for it, be proactive and give the information to them. It will serve you well. It will serve you well down the road. And then really the last topic I wanted to talk a little bit about is safety kits. Some of you guys may already travel with very strategic items that help make you feel safer. I recommend, a number of different things. You may want to have just a little kit that you carry around in your bag or your backpack, or even something that is just in your car under your seat. Maybe you want to have a safety kit in your car and in the bag that you carry with you regularly. But that safety kit can contain a number of different things: pepper spray, a taser. One of the other things that I recommend on a fairly regular basis is this portable door lock. This portable door lock is very easy to use. They can be purchased on Amazon, and I'm sure probably other places, but this gives you an added layer of safety. This is particularly great for hotels and older apartment complexes that maybe don't have really, really good locking mechanisms in place. This is portable. It's something that you can carry with you. It's something that you can use in a wide variety of different scenarios. Like, let's say that you're on one of those excursions, and that excursion requires you to stop at a gas station in a rural area because you need to use the restroom. You can use this lock in those public locations like that. And again, it's going to protect you. It's just one of those things that I think is really valuable. And you kind of can pick and choose what you feel like you need to have in your safety kit. If you have a safety kit in your car, make sure it's something that is easily accessible regardless of where you're seated in the car. Most of the time, you're going to want it as close as you can to the driver's seat. So maybe it's under your seat. Maybe you've got one of those little pockets right on the inside door. Just make it really accessible, really, really accessible. I'm going to bring Steve back on, and we're going to maybe hopefully answer a few questions. And the first 5 people that ask questions will get entered into a drawing to win their own Safety First portable door lock.
Very cool. Very cool, Ashley. Thank you. That was fantastic information. And I have a lot of questions, and we had some questions that have come in through the community offline. So I definitely want to bring some of them to your attention.
Awesome.
Because housing is really, and you and I have talked a number of times before about this, but housing is obviously it's key to travel nursing, number one. But number two, it's the housing inventory has been so tight over the past few months that everybody now is asking about housing, not only the availability of housing, but also too, I'm assuming that because there's a lack of housing, and I don't want to get too off topic here, but
right.
There's probably a number of scammers out there that are trying to take advantage of it, number one. And number two, I would imagine that travelers, unfortunately, have on occasion put themselves in unsafe situations because the
Agreed.
housing market is so tight right now. So can you talk about that a little bit? I'd love to get some perspective. Yeah,
absolutely. So, we did a session earlier in the summer when we realized very quickly that the housing was going to be a big challenge. And I had hoped that by the end of the summer, we were going to get into a spot where that got a little bit better, but it has not.
Yeah.
The vacancy is between, I don't know, probably 3 to 5% on average.
Wow.
Nationwide. And if you go into more of those niche markets, those more rural areas where the options were already really limited, it becomes incredibly challenging. So there are lots of different things that you can do. I say this every time we do a housing session, but first and foremost, if your agency has resources, you need to make sure that you're utilizing those, because they're more than likely going to have experts that are on deck, that are knowledgeable and can easily, help you negotiate that. And in some cases may even be able to actually help you secure your housing. So that would be the first thing I would do. Secondly, utilizing some of the websites I referenced earlier. Crime Check, Spot Crime is another one, and really doing your due diligence around the safety. The other thing that we have actually seen an uptick in people choosing to do is to maybe book a hotel for a week or two so that they can physically go and look at some of these options. Because to Steve's point, the inventory is much smaller, and sometimes not sometimes, pretty much all the time, the best options are going to be the ones that are going to be booked and filled. So you are in a situation where you're not necessarily settling, but you are in a situation where you're having to work within that 3 to 5%. You're having to find something short term, and then you want it to be cost effective. So that's really challenging. So maybe you book a hotel for a week or two, and you go in and you do some due diligence, physically, visually see these places, and then you can actually view them. You can assess your surroundings. You can kind of figure out how safe you're going to feel. You're going to really get a feel for the area. So that's one of the biggest things I think people can do, is to just give themselves a little bit of a safety net, particularly if they're going to do their housing on their own.
Okay. What do you do? So actually, we talk about travelers that work with their agencies to procure housing. And then others get housing on their own. I'm sure probably some of it is because they feel like they may be saving money or what have you. Tell me a little bit about, in terms of travel nurse safety, what are some of the advantages of working through your agency's housing department? How does that help with the safety process?
So in my mind, and I can share a little bit about how TNA's housing team is set up. Everything that we book, for the most part, if we're going to actually book it on your behalf, there is going to be a certain level of vetting that is going to be done. So we are going to do our due diligence on our end so that we can help the travelers make an educated decision when they're selecting their housing. So a lot of those steps, we use Google Earth, and we will literally get on that map and drive around the areas, get a feel for what it looks like. And then we utilize a lot of the same websites that I referenced. So you're getting an agency support in doing a little bit more due diligence than you may or may not have the time for. And I think too, having a housing expert that's been in the industry for a really long time and understands the front and the back side of it is going to be hugely beneficial, because they may look at an option and go, this is not a good idea. Like, I see a lot of basement apartments or garden apartments. Little known fact is, if it is referred to as garden, it's being called garden to make it seem really fancy and cutesy, but really that is just a fancy way of saying that you are going to be in the basement, and you may or may not have a window.
I wish I knew that when I rented my first apartment out of college, actually. So it's, many years too late, but no, that's a good point.
So you're just getting this wealth of knowledge that you can't replicate. And that's really, really important, particularly for new travelers, I think. And I think it's really important too, particularly in areas that you've never been before. It just gives you a layer of safety and peace of mind.
Well, I was going to say, you've been with TNA Healthcare now for what, going on 20 years?
It'll be 19 years in just a couple of weeks.
All right. Well, I would imagine that you must have some go-to places, some go-to areas, some go-to housing, right? You're like, hey, let me help you out here. So that's another thing hard to know that on your own, right?
You can't replicate that. We have, we're constantly getting phone calls, obviously, from vendors. But we do have over time, have built a really robust vendor list. And you're right. We have properties that if we have a nurse that's going to a particular location, we refer them. And we do that a lot in those rural areas. If we find a private owner or a hotel that's kind of set up as an apartment style offering in those locations where it's really hard to locate housing, we will repeatedly refer travelers there. And that's also one of the reasons why it's important to give really candid feedback as well, because the agencies don't know what they don't know. So if your experience was not as you expected it to be, it's really important to share that with either your recruiter or your housing specialist.
Very good. Well, listen, we've got a number of questions that have come in from the community who are sparking a lot of questions here. So let me see if I can go through some of them here. Reagan says, thank you very much for these tips. Very helpful. Let me see. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. A very good one. One of our community members asks, in terms of safety, do you recommend Uber or Lyft when traveling, or is a rental better? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Yeah.
I think that overall, well, number one, just like everything else, you can read ratings. You can learn about those drivers.
Right.
So I definitely recommend that you look at those little profiles. I haven't done Lyft in a long time, but I know Uber has. It'll give you a little blurb and it'll tell you how many stars they have, and it'll give you a little bit of idea of like the different reviews that they've gotten. And I think that's usually very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately, doing your own thing and getting that rental car is probably going to be the safest. But I think that Uber and Lyft, as long as you're being mindful, and you're also going to want to incorporate some of these things we just talked about into that experience as well. Have your safety kit in your little bag.
Right.
Make sure that you're telling somebody you're taking an Uber or a Lyft to and from a location. Those things are all really important. So if I had to pick between the two, if I had a budget to do a rental car, I would recommend doing that. And most of the agencies are going to have some sort of rental car discounts that they can extend to their travelers as well.
Good to know. Good to know. Yeah, I know too with Uber and Lyft, there's also kind of the individual safety check-ins that people can do, monitor my ride and so forth with friends or family members. So that's also helpful as well. All right, some other questions here. Well, Rachel says, I also carry an emergency beacon when I hike.
I love that. I'm adding that to the list.
First I've ever heard of that, actually. Of course, it shows you how much I go hiking.
No, that emergency beacon's probably incredibly handy. And I think depending on how it works, it can probably both provide light to help somebody locate you if it starts getting dark. And I think they even have some fancier ones that actually you can transmit some sort of a signal to a certain extent as well.
That is a first. I have not heard of that. All right. Reagan says, the lock that you showed, the travel lock, she said, I have the same lock. It helps me sleep so much better at night. You want to show that lock again, Ashley? And you are giving that away, right?
I'm giving this one away. Yes, I am.
Portable door lock. Okay, what does it retail for, Ashley?
It's in the $15 range, depending on the provider. I think you can go out to Amazon, and I think it's in the $15 range.
Okay, very good. All right. Tony asks, what about portable alarm systems? Do you know if they work, and are they worth the value?
From what I have heard, they do work. And I think they are incredibly valuable. In fact, I had a sweet friend gift me. It was similar to an alarm, but it was more of almost like a tracker where you could send signals to people's phones that were friends with you. And that's also probably really valuable. I will have to figure out exactly what that was called, but I ended up gifting it to somebody else that had a younger teenage daughter, and she was going away to college. So I gifted it to somebody that I knew would really benefit from it. But I think that as long as you do your homework on those, I think those portable alarms are great. Okay. And I think that you could probably find one that was relatively reasonable, but I feel like it would be worth the investment. I know they make some versions that you can carry in your bag, but they also make those versions that you can keep on your keys. And honestly, having the one on the keys is probably going to be the most convenient.
Okay. Well, Reagan mentioned, how about the new safety bracelets, which I think is what you're, kind of another variation of that. the new safety bracelets that you press and it alerts police and
Yep.
contacts, etc.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. And the one thing about those items, though, is as you guys move from location to location, it's going to be key for you to make sure you update the information for the area that you are located in. Because the last thing you want is to forget to do that, and then it call the police in Tacoma, Washington, and you're over here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's just not going to work well. So just remember to make
Great
sure
point.
you're being diligent and updating the location information so that you can get service or help quickly.
Now, you mentioned earlier, and Kirsten from our community asked, what do you recommend for a safety kit? I have an emergency kit in the back of my car. So we talk about safety kits, emergency kits. Are there any brands you would recommend? And beyond that, what should be in them? What should be in your safety kit?
I do think there are probably some specifically pre-made kits that you can probably purchase. I would recommend that you maybe consider piecemealing it together based on what you think your specific needs are going to be. I mentioned the pepper spray, although the pepper spray is great to have on your keychain. In fact, I have pepper spray, a Christmas gift from my sister that was in my stocking this last year, and I carry it diligently. I've not had to use it, but it's there if I need it. I think also just maybe having some sort of a portable, rechargeable safety light would be really valuable. That way, like if you're in a situation where your car breaks down and you're on the side of the road and your battery is dead and you have no power to your car, maybe having like a little portable collapsible light or a little lantern would probably be ideal. I also highly recommend a little rain poncho, and they make those where they fold up really small and they're really super convenient. I would recommend that. I would also recommend keeping a blanket of some sort in your car. And that's more for breaking down. So in my mind, the kit that you would need to have like tools like pepper spray, mace, taser. Those are the kinds of things you want to tuck under your seat. But then as far as like a bigger safety kit, most safety kits, depending on the brand, are going to contain things like jumper cables. And that's also one of the things that should probably be very high on your list. Honestly, the jumper cables are nice, but having one of those little devices where you can actually jump your car from the little device versus relying on a perfect stranger to pull over and help you jump your car would probably be valuable as well. And obviously first aid kits, which I don't have to tell this audience. I mean, the first aid kit is incredibly important. So those are just some of the things I would recommend. They also make a device. We bought my nephew, who is in his early 20s, one a couple of years back for Christmas, but it's one of those pocket knives that also doubles as a seatbelt cutter that you can easily get at. Like if you're in an accident and you cannot come out of your seatbelt, it allows you to very quickly cut it, and then it usually has a device on the opposite end that you can then quickly utilize to break the window if you get trapped.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah,
they're very versatile. They're very affordable, and I think that would also be something that would be good to have in your car kit. 100%.
Let's go back to the actual housing component itself.
Okay. Sure.
So obviously it's not a perfect world. I assume that on rare occasions there are travel nurses that will go to an assignment and their housing situation is not ideal.
Correct.
A couple of things along those lines. Number one, what would you highlight as some red flags? So if somebody is in a housing situation, they get there, let's say they're a relatively new travel nurse, have not rented from this particular landlord or what have you before, what are some red flags that you would say be on the lookout for? This may not be a good situation that might not be apparent to a traveler that is not experienced.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, there are a couple of different things. I think you typically just have this awareness, I think, of how it feels, but there also has to be really tangible things. So I think that the number one thing you need to be on the lookout for is if you arrive there and it looks completely different than what it looked like in the photographs and the information that was provided to you, I would press pause and I would find a hotel and I would start making some phone calls. That would be the first thing. But then some things are very, very, very deceiving. You get there and it's very cute and it looks very cozy, and then you get in and you start seeing things. So having kind of weird traffic or lingering strangers. I've had a traveler one time that repeatedly had the same guy that would end up landing on a corner that was right adjacent from her unit, and he would just stand there and he would just kind of stare. So I think anybody that makes you feel uncomfortable or feel unsafe, those are going to be red flags as well. Private owners are being utilized a lot more often now than they were even a year ago. And if I had to pick between the two, honestly, the apartment complexes are just very streamlined. Typically, they have safety protocols and different things in place. The private owners tend to be a little bit different of a breed. That's not to say that they're good or bad, because a significant portion of our traveler population have really good experiences. So, but we've had private owners before, like you may be going into a duplex or a house that has like a little mother-in-law's cottage in the backyard or something like that. And if you have a private owner that's a little too nosy, a little too much in your business, and constantly knocking on the door or constantly entering your unit without your permission or awareness, those are big red flags as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
Airbnb is one of the other ones. I mean, especially if you're doing a room share, you just really need to be able to assess that. I've had people that have had items stolen. I've had people that have had, very uncomfortable interactions with owners. I've had people be intoxicated and and wake the traveler up in the middle of the night. I've had a traveler be put in a situation where they had to offer first aid to somebody in a very compromising situation. And so I think all of those things are things that in your head you should probably be saying, I need to get out. So I mean, that's that kind of scrapes the surface. I'm sure we could probably talk about that for a little while.
Sure, and I'm sure that the vast majority of traveler situations are safe and everything goes well from that perspective. But it's just that 0.5% or whatever it is that you need to be aware of. Let me ask you this. So along the lines of some personal safety, one of the questions that came in was, what steps should someone take if they're the victim of a crime while on an assignment? That's a really interesting question. I mean, what happens if your car is broken into or your wallet stolen or something? What did agencies typically do to help out? What do you advise as the first step in those situations? What should they do?
Report it to the local police department first and foremost. Okay. First and foremost. And I've had situations where I've had them contact the housing team before. But the reality is that, and I hate to say this, but to a certain extent, you're on your own. It would be no different than if you went out and rented your own place outside of the agency, or if you weren't working for an agency and you just moved to a different location to start a new job. So report it to the police first and foremost. If it's something that's going to be covered within the boundaries of your insurance coverage. Oh, and that's another thing I want to talk about really quickly too. Yeah, I just thought of that. After you've filed the police report, then you also need to make sure that you are contacting your insurance provider to report that theft or that incident as well. And then as far as the agency goes, it's going to depend on the type of crime that occurs, and I think we all are very aware that there are some very sensitive natured crimes that can occur, and in those situations, my hope is that you're going to have really great support from your clinical and your human resources team. My hope is that you feel comfortable enough to pick up the phone and ask what kind of resources are available to you. With TNA, we do EAP, and there's some other resources as well. But first and foremost, you need to report that crime to the local police department. And if it is something that's going to benefit or is going to impact your insurance, you need to report that to them as well. And then there are going to be some things that are going to happen. If you just need moral support, my hope is that you have a support system between the human resources department and the clinical team that can support you and at least navigate you down the right avenue to get you some assistance. Ultimately, we want to support people, and we take that very seriously.
So what about insurance? You wanted to be
Yes, thank
reminded
you.
about that. Yes. So.
Make sure you have renter's insurance. Make sure you have renter's insurance. And I get a lot of questions around, well, if I move around a lot, is that really beneficial? It is. It is. Because if your computer is stolen, or your really expensive digital camera, or there's a number of different things that you guys are carrying around with you, and that renter's insurance protects you to a certain extent from liability as well. And additionally, it's going to cover the contents of your unit, the things that you brought with you that are covered within that policy. And it's just kind of like we were talking about updating your location for the various different safety tools that are available out there. You need to make sure you're updating your physical location with your insurance carrier as well.
Okay. Yeah. Insurance. It's funny. We see it talked about often on the Gypsy Nurse Travel Nurse Network discussion group, but it's insurance more in the area of liability, not renter's insurance. That's rarely mentioned. What could people expect to pay for renter's insurance typically?
It's usually pretty affordable.
Okay.
You're more than likely going to have automobile insurance coverage, and typically most of those major insurance providers are going to have a renter's insurance option as well. And I would say, probably no more than probably $50 a month. In most cases, it's probably a lot less than that.
Okay. And you can get on a short-term basis?
Well, yeah, I believe so. You may end up having to buy a policy and then just update it as you go. But it's one of those policies too that you can drop and then add back on at any point in time. It's not one of those things where you get dinged for a lapse in coverage, because if you're going home during that period of time, you don't necessarily need the coverage.
You mentioned roommate situations before. We do see some of these inquiries going back and forth in some of our discussion groups. What are some of the cautionary notes that you would have for this? So we're talking about situations in which people are obviously, they're not renting from a hotel or short or long-term stay type of place. They are in a situation where they are sharing sharing a home with somebody or sharing an apartment. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm sure it works out on occasion sometimes, but what are some of the things to think about? I know you've not recommended that before, so I'd love to hear your take.
I'm not a fan unless you're partnering with another traveler that you know, or that, and we have our recruiters internally sometimes will pool their resources and they'll introduce travelers. But I think that even in those situations, if you didn't meet them on assignment and you don't know them and you're going into the situation, I think there is almost like a little meet and greet and interview, whether you do it virtually or over the phone, that really needs to take place. And I think there are some very key questions that you need to ask. I think you need to kind of decide what those questions need to look like for you. But I think knowing, if what shift they're working, if they're going to be driving to and from work, are they going to have their own transportation? I think those things are really valuable. But I think also understanding pet situations, if they plan on having any other family or friends visit while you're sharing your space with them, because that can get real awkward too. So I think those are, just off the top of my head, are probably things that would be incredibly valuable. But at the same time, I think that there is also a narrative that you kind of have to decide in your head. If I'm going to share with somebody that I'm meeting for the first time or I don't know that well, these are the different things that I think I need to be aware of. And honestly, if they get offended because you ask a question, then they're not your person. I mean, you're sharing your space. It's not like you're going to just be living virtually, and you don't really have to be offended or irritated or annoyed or put out by any of their very specific behaviors. You're going to physically be living with this person. So I think you have to kind of decide what questions and what things are really important to you and have kind of a preset questionnaire. It's a lot harder to do that with avenues like Airbnb, where you're doing a room share. And I have had an abundance of travelers talk about what amazing experiences that they have had. And I think there is a certain level of due diligence you have to do there. obviously on Airbnb, there's lots of opportunities for you to read reviews and get feedback from other, travelers, not necessarily travel nurses or traveling healthcare professionals, but individuals that have booked at those properties before. Um, and but the Airbnb piece makes me a little nervous because there's so many unknowns and you don't have as much control. But I'm telling you, I get pretty consistent feedback, but the times that I have seen it go wrong, it's gone really wrong. And it was a very negative experience. Housing is just such a personal piece of the overall traveling healthcare experience that you have to be mindful. You just do.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a point. I mean, it's obviously housing is a very important piece of travel nursing. In your experience, you've been doing this. You said it'll be 19 years very soon, right?
Yes.
What percentage would you assign the housing component in terms of a successful assignment? Is it 30% of a successful assignment? How important is the house? Because there's some people say, hey, you know what? I can live anywhere, I can sleep anywhere. It doesn't matter as long as I like the facility and I'm getting paid well.
And you're right. I mean, there are some people where housing is just not that important to them. And I get that to a certain extent. Although I feel like I'm a little bit more, I need a little bit more. So I would be one of those ones where all of those things would be really important to me. I think that I would say probably 25 to 30% part of the experience, because that's your home away from home. You're setting that stage. That is the place when you have been on the unit for 12 hours and it was a really intense day and you had a lot of patients that required a lot of care. I mean, you're exhausted. The last thing you want to do is go home and deal with roommate drama, deal with landlord issues, deal with, not feeling comfortable and safe walking from your car to the front door. Those are things you just don't need. So in my mind, it can make or break. I mean, it really can. So I think that it does have a significant impact on the overall experience. I feel like it sets the stage. I mean, that's their happy place. That's where they go when they're done with their shift, And so to me, it's got to be comfortable. You've got to be able to feel safe, and it's got to have, and it may be that you just need the basic necessities, and that's fine. But that awareness of safety and just feeling safe and feeling comfortable in that location, I think is plays a big part, because that's where you recharge your battery. That's where you go to kind of regroup and then hit the ground running again.
Let me ask you about a trend that we've seen grow quite a bit over the past couple of years in the Gypsy Nurse discussion groups, and that is RV travel.
Yes.
And I'm curious, what role, somebody like yourself, Director of Housing for TNA Healthcare, what role do you have in terms of if somebody is going on an assignment and they have an RV? How do you or somebody in your role get involved in? I mean, obviously they have a place to stay in terms of the RV, but where are they going? I mean, how do you work that?
Well, we're fortunate enough to have an individual on the housing team that actually understands and knows RVs pretty well. Okay. And so we've kind of cultivated a list of the different questions that we need to ask, because the RVs all have different needs. They're different sizes. Some have pop outs, some don't. So it just it's a very in-depth process, but if it's something that a traveler needs help with at TNA, it is something that we can help with. We're also working on a new partnership that we're hoping that we're going to get to roll out hopefully early next year, which is going to give some travelers some access to some discounts. I also met a really cool spouse of a traveler at TravCom a few weeks ago, and they are RV travelers, and he is currently developing an app that is going to be very user-friendly for traveling healthcare professionals and RVs. And he's supposed to let me know when it's launching, and we may get some opportunities to do some beta testing. So we are looking for some opportunities to widen some of the resources by adding some really specific resources around RVs.
Well, I feel like there's going to be some breaking news coming from you and housing at TNA Healthcare in the near future. So I hope you come back and talk to us about that that RV
Definitely.
announcement. But we see it's definitely growing.
Yes.
There seems to be a new generation, if you will, of travel nurses that are using RVs. I mean, I know that people have been using them for a
Mhm.
while for travel nursing, which seems like, at least to us at the Gypsy Nurse, there's just more and more discussion
Mhm.
about it. Perhaps pandemic related too, in terms of issues with exposure to the virus and wanting to isolate and those sorts
Yep.
of things. Not having to worry about staying with anybody else or checking on those situations. Just like, hey, I've got my own place.
Yep.
I can go back. I don't have to worry about it. So there definitely seems, from our perspective, a lot more interest, a lot more
Yes.
travel nurses that are using RVs.
Yes, it's definitely been a trend for a while. And the RVs are kind of challenging too because, so like for instance, this is my public service announcement regarding this topic. If you're planning on taking a winter assignment on the East Coast, think Massachusetts or Maine,
Yes, yes.
they close their RV parks down.
Mhm.
Because of the very, very, very cold temperatures and the winter element that implements that. So if you're an RV person, maybe consider going south or
Yeah.
west instead of going up the East Coast because it is more challenging. So that's just a little food for thought as I can't believe it's October already and we're already moving into fall and winter assignments. It's hard to wrap my brain around.
Well, as a Boston native, yes, I can tell people that they certainly don't want to be stuck in Boston in the winter, without housing or without a place to park their RV, because it's tough enough as it is in Boston during the winter time.
Mhm.
So they want to be careful of that. We've got a couple of more questions here, and then I think we can probably wrap up our session and talk about our giveaway
Perfect.
and so forth.
Perfect.
We do have a question going back to kind of this personal safety and kind of this roommate component.
Mhm.
Are there any sites, are there any public sites that you can do background checks on possible roommates?
There are.
Okay.
And there are a couple of different platforms. There is you got to be mindful too, because there are a couple of scam sites out there, but
Okay.
there is a ClearChecks website. There is also a Check People website. And now here's what I'm going to tell you though. You can't run your roommate's background without their permission. So just make sure you get their permission. I mean, you could do some
Okay.
investigative, probably due diligence and probably gather enough information. But if you're really wanting to do a background check, I think it is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And you just have to find a reputable service to do that. Some of the ones that come up, Check People and ClearChecks are probably the two that are probably at the top of my list.
So
So,
if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is, if somebody was getting into a roommate situation
mhm.
and you were evaluating them, you as a travel nurse could say, would you mind, I'd be interested in being a roommate with you, but would you mind if I run a background check on you
Yes.
first? And if they give some sort of consent, they can do it and you go from there.
Yes. Yes. And on the flip side of that, you also have to be willing to do the same.
Okay. Okay. So it must be reciprocal.
I think in a roommate situation.
Yeah.
Now, if it's your place and you're going to be sharing your space, that might be a little bit different of a dynamic. But I wouldn't be
Mhm.
surprised if you asked or you informed somebody and that you wanted to do that, and they may ask you to agree to do the same. And one of the things that, like, if you're looking for a roommate, any type of searches or social media posts that you do in
Mhm.
search of that, if doing a background check on sharing space with somebody else is one of your requirements, include that information. That way you're only going to get people that are going to be at least willing to consider the concept of that.
Well, on a related note, you mentioned social media, and certainly
Mhm.
the Gypsy Nurse, we have a huge social media platform. We happy to say we have over 460,000 followers across all of our platforms, including Facebook and others. But it is, you talk about safety, you talk about traveling. It is a cautionary note. You don't want to share personal information on any form of social media unless you know the person, you're direct messaging or what have you. But I do see sometimes people sharing information regarding phone numbers and those sorts of things. Hey, I'd be interested in a roommate, contact me or whatever. And they're sharing it with thousands of people. Not something that you want to do, but I think
Private
sometimes when people are,
message.
Yes, exactly. I think sometimes
That's a
people
safety.
get a
That
little
that
anxious.
safety
Yeah.
tip has been brought to you by Steve Curtin. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, just like we were talking about as relating to sharing information, that is going to be just as valuable when you're doing your search. You have got to make sure that you are being mindful of how you share that information.
Right. Well, Ashley, we are coming up at the end of the hour. That has flown by. This has been absolutely fabulous.
Good.
There has been some excellent, as always, because this is not your first time with us, as always, there's been excellent information. I think that to the extent that housing is an important part of the travel nursing experience, this is a session that I hope that people will watch on demand, and kind of a public service announcement, but all of our presentations this week during our virtual conference are going to be available on demand on our website. Just go to thegypsynurse.com/events, and you will see all of the events there on demand. So if you weren't able to join us, or only able to join us for a portion of this, you can see this whole session on demand. But just some fantastic information. Ashley, we really appreciate your time.
Sure.
We know that this is something that you are absolutely, you can tell by your enthusiasm and by your knowledge, is something you love to do. And having spoken with you offline and worked with you on other projects before, it's just your knowledge just comes through, your enthusiasm comes through. So people are, if they have the good fortune of working with you, they're lucky, because
Thank you.
not too many people I know that are more knowledgeable about housing than you are. So really appreciate your sharing the information with our
Yeah,
community
definitely.
today. Yeah.
Happy to do it. Happy to do
Oh,
it.
all right. And we have a comment, our last comment. So much great information. I took so many notes during this live session. Thank you so much. So there you go. People
You're very welcome.
are taking notes. Rachel joins us again. Hello, Rachel.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much, Ashley. So many good tips. And, I hate seeing it because, we have our travel nurse housing group, and some people will have such sad stories about being scammed or anything,
Yep.
people going through their items while they're at work. And especially during the pandemic, they would come home and half of their stuff would be outside because they were, didn't want them in there. And so I know nurses go through a lot, and once you get the hang of it, you guys will be a-okay. But sometimes it takes a little while to get it, figured out, and just follow Ashley's steps.
Definitely. Definitely.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
You're welcome.
All right, another great session, Steve. We'd also like to thank, Ashley for coming on, but also Fusion Marketplace. We can't say enough about them for being a sponsor. And if you missed the beginning, Fusion Marketplace is a one-stop shop for healthcare travelers where they can easily compare benefits, packages, and reviews across multiple agencies. As a traveler-first driven platform, Fusion Marketplace is a curated career experience where healthcare travelers can take control of their career. Their website is right there on the screen. It's fusionmarketplace.com. So go ahead and give that a visit. Thank our sponsors for the virtual conference.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fusion Marketplace, for being our sponsor. And thank you, Ashley, for sharing that fantastic information. And then Rachel, just in terms of giveaways, I know that Ashley had that portable lock, and you were going to be selecting somebody, I believe, to receive that portable lock. And so just for those that are interested, you'll be communicating with Ashley, and we will reach out to you and get your information, have it shipped out. And then we also have gift cards that we'll be giving away. And Rachel, you will be taking care of that for the community as well.
Yep. So be on the lookout in your emails, because since you registered, we'll just send it directly to your email. So we will be handing those out very, very soon. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we have another session at 7 p.m. tonight. We have Brittany Garcia. She's going to be talking about traveling with children, which is a very hot topic.
All right. All right. Thanks, Rachel. We'll see you later on tonight.
All right. Thank you.